The day my parents sold my grandmother's necklace, they thought they'd made a few $100s. 3 weeks later, they discovered they'd accidentally thrown away an inheritance worth millions. Because the fortune had never been hidden in a bank account. It had been hidden inside the necklace they insisted belonged to them. And by the time they realized what they'd done, I was the only person who could still recover it. If you've ever been treated like the least important person in your own family, if you've ever watched greed destroy people who claim to love you, you're going to understand exactly why I made the choices I did. If stories about betrayal, justice, and revenge are your thing, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Now let me tell you how one old necklace destroyed my entire family. My name is Caroline Hughes. I'm 29 years old, and for almost my entire life, I believed I occupied a strange place inside my own family. Not hated, not loved, just convenient. I was the child people remembered only when they needed something. My older brother, Daniel, was the golden child. 3 years older, star athlete, confident, loud, the kind of person who walked into a room expecting everyone to adjust themselves around him. And somehow, they always did. My parents loved saying they treated us equally, but equality isn't measured by words. It's measured by patterns. Daniel got a new car when he turned 16. I got Dad's 15-year-old sedan after it had already broken down twice. Daniel's college tuition was paid in full. I graduated with nearly $80,000 in student loans because, according to my parents, money was tighter by then. Except, 2 months later, they remodeled their kitchen. I learned early that arguing never changed anything. Every complaint somehow became evidence that I was too sensitive. Every disappointment became my fault. Every success belonged to the family. Every failure belonged to me. Only one person ever saw through it. Grandma Eleanor. She never treated me differently. When I was little, she'd invite me into her greenhouse behind her cottage. The entire place smelled like wet soil and lavender. The windows fogged during spring mornings. Birds nested outside. And she'd tell me stories while trimming roses. She believed plants listened. She believed people revealed who they truly were when nobody important was watching. Most importantly, she believed I noticed things other people ignored. You watch before you speak, she'd tell me. That's a gift, Caroline. When I was 23, Grandma became sick. Not suddenly, slowly. The kind of illness that steals tiny pieces from someone every month until one day you realize they're mostly memories. During those years, I visited constantly, not because I expected anything, because she was lonely. Daniel visited twice in almost 2 years. My parents usually stopped by on holidays. They always seemed busy, but somehow, they always found time to ask Grandma about paperwork, investments, the house, her jewelry, things that felt strangely practical while she was still alive. I hated those conversations. One afternoon, I overheard my father asking if she'd updated her will. Grandma smiled without answering. Later, she whispered to me, "People show their priorities when they think time is running out." I didn't fully understand then. I do now, about 6 months before she passed away. She handed me a small velvet box. It was dark blue. The corners had faded white from age. Inside rested an antique gold necklace. Simple, elegant. An oval pendant with tiny engraved flowers around the edge. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed wealth. "If anyone asks," she said softly, "tell them it's sentimental." I laughed. "It is sentimental." She squeezed my hand. "No, Caroline." Her eyes stayed fixed on mine. "I mean, that's all you should ever say." Something about her voice made my smile disappear. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, for just a second. "I've hidden many things over my lifetime." Then she smiled again. "But not every secret belongs to today." I wanted to ask more. Instead, she changed the subject completely. Looking back, I realized she did that often, leaving breadcrumbs, never explanations. Grandma passed away 8 months later. The funeral was beautiful. Gray skies, cold wind, the scent of lilies filled the church. Everyone cried, some sincerely, some less sincerely. After the service, my parents insisted we all gather at Grandma's house. It didn't feel like mourning, it felt like inventory. Daniel walked through every room. Dad opened cabinets. Mom kept making lists. What should happen with this? Who wants that? Is this worth anything? I felt sick. Grandma hadn't even been buried yet. The necklace remained around my neck beneath my sweater. Hidden, exactly as she'd asked. That evening, Mom noticed it while I was helping clean dishes. Oh, she frowned. You're wearing Mother's necklace. I nodded. She gave it to me. When? A few months ago. She looked surprised, then suspicious. I don't remember her mentioning that. I don't think she told anyone. Dad joined us. What necklace? Mom pointed. Apparently Mother gave Caroline Eleanor's pendant. Dad held out his hand. Let me see. I unclasped it carefully. He turned it over. His tone sounded disappointed. I thought it was the sapphire piece. No. Mom sighed. Just that old gold thing. Dad handed it back. Probably worth a few hundred. I slipped it on again. I don't care what it's worth. Grandma gave it to me. Dad shrugged. Fair enough. I thought that was the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. A week later, Mom called. You should leave the necklace here for a while. What? It belongs with the family jewelry until everything is sorted. It was Grandma's gift to me. Silence. Then. It still belongs to the family. No. It belongs to me. Her voice became colder. We'll discuss this Sunday. Sunday became an ambush. Daniel agreed with my parents immediately. It's just jewelry. Dad folded his arms. We're trying to divide things fairly. It already was divided. By Grandma. Mom sighed dramatically. You're making this difficult. No. I'm respecting her wishes. Dad leaned closer. Unless you have paperwork proving she gifted it. It technically belongs to the estate. I stared at him. You know she gave it to me. Legally. He emphasized the word. That's different. I left before dinner. I cried the entire drive home. Not because of the necklace, because I finally accepted something I'd avoided admitting for years. My parents didn't actually care what Grandma wanted, only what benefited them. For months, they occasionally brought it up. Every holiday, every birthday, every family dinner, little comments. Still wearing that old necklace? Funny how attached you've become. You know sentimental things shouldn't divide families. Eventually, I stopped attending most gatherings. Life became quieter, peaceful, or at least, I believed it had. Then everything changed. One rainy Tuesday, I came home from work to find my apartment door slightly open, not broken, unlocked. My stomach tightened instantly. Inside, drawers had been opened. Nothing expensive was missing. Laptop, television, cash. Everything remained. Only one thing had disappeared. The velvet jewelry box, the necklace. My heart began pounding. At first, I thought I'd been robbed by someone with bizarre priorities. Then I noticed the note on my kitchen counter, written in my mother's handwriting. We borrowed it. You'll understand eventually. Borrowed. Borrowed. I called her immediately. She answered cheerfully. Oh, you got home. Where's my necklace? Silence. Then, we sold it. Everything inside me froze. What? It wasn't doing anyone any good sitting in a box. You broke into my apartment. We have your spare key. You sold it? Dad took the phone. It brought $650. I couldn't even breathe. You stole from me. No. We made a family decision. It wasn't yours. You've always exaggerated. Click. They hung up. I stood there, still holding my phone, unable to process what had just happened. I had no idea that losing the necklace wasn't actually the worst thing that was about to happen. Because 3 days later, an old envelope addressed in my grandmother's handwriting arrived in my mailbox, and everything I thought I knew collapsed. For almost 10 minutes, I just stared at the envelope. It was cream-colored, thick, and slightly yellowed with age. My name was written across the front in the neat, looping handwriting I had watched my grandmother use for years. Caroline Hughes. Nothing more. No return address. No stamp. It had been hand-delivered. My fingers actually trembled as I slid a letter opener beneath the flap. I wasn't someone who believed in signs. I didn't think the universe had a plan. But after the necklace had been stolen, after my parents had looked me in the eye and called it a family decision, holding that envelope felt like Grandma had reached through time. Inside was a folded letter and a small brass key taped to the paper. The moment I saw the key, my pulse quickened. It wasn't a house key. It wasn't a car key. It looked old, very old. One of those tiny ornate keys with intricate grooves and a decorative bow that belonged to another century. I unfolded the letter. My dear Caroline, if you're reading this, then one of two things has happened. Either I lived long enough to explain everything, or your family proved me right. I pray it was the first, but I've lived with your parents long enough to suspect it was the second. A knot formed in my throat. I kept reading. There is something our family has protected for almost 90 years. Not money, not jewelry, a promise. Your great-grandfather, Thomas Whitmore, feared that greed would eventually consume future generations. So he divided his wealth in an unusual way. The fortune cannot be claimed without three things: the key, the pendant, and the rightful heir. I stopped breathing. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, all I could hear was my heartbeat. I read the paragraph again, then again. Surely I was misunderstanding. Surely Grandma didn't mean. No, she couldn't. I continued. The necklace you wear is not valuable because of the gold. Inside the pendant is a miniature locking mechanism that fits the brass key enclosed with this letter. Once opened, you will discover instructions leading to the final document. Never tell anyone, especially your parents. Greed has already cost them more than they realize. I looked at the empty space on my neck. The necklace was gone. Sold. To whom? Where? For $650. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might throw up. I forced myself to continue. If the necklace has been lost, I am deeply sorry. It means our family's fortune may remain hidden forever. But remember this: objects leave trails, people leave records. Greed always becomes careless. Find the necklace. Trust no one until you hold it again. Love always. Grandma Eleanor. I sat perfectly still. 5 minutes. Maybe 10. The apartment suddenly felt much smaller. The walls seemed to close in. My parents hadn't just stolen something sentimental. If Grandma's letter was true, they had sold the single item required to unlock a fortune that had survived generations, because they wanted $650. I laughed, not because anything was funny, because the absurdity hurt too much. Then I cried. Harder than I had cried at Grandma's funeral, not because of money, because she had trusted me, and I had failed her. The next morning I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't call first. I didn't want them preparing excuses. Dad opened the door. He looked mildly annoyed. Caroline. I need the name. What name? The person you sold the necklace to. He folded his arms. I don't know. You don't know? It was an antique dealer. Which one? I don't remember. You expect me to believe that? Mom appeared behind him. Oh, honestly. It's just an old necklace. I pulled Grandma's letter from my purse. It wasn't. Neither of them looked interested. Dad actually chuckled. Did she leave you another treasure map? I stared at him. He hadn't intended it as a joke. He had no idea how close he'd come to the truth. What antique shop? I don't remember. Think. No. You stole from me. We borrowed it. You sold it. It helped pay for your father's golf membership. I blinked. I'm sorry. Mom shrugged. Money was tight. I almost laughed again. Golf? They sold Grandma's last gift. For golf? You broke into my apartment. Dad's face hardened. We used our key. I never gave you permission. You've become incredibly dramatic. No. I've become incredibly tired. I looked at each of them. Really looked. Not as my parents. As people. People who had convinced themselves they could justify anything if they called it practical. People who honestly believed they had done nothing wrong. And suddenly, I stopped arguing. Because you can't reason with people who rewrite reality every time they're wrong. I'll find out where you sold it. Dad shrugged. Good luck. I turned around. As I reached the driveway, Dad called after me. If you recover it. I stopped. It's still family property. I didn't answer. I simply walked away. Finding the necklace became an obsession. Every antique dealer within 50 miles, every pawn shop, estate jewelry buyers, collectors, nothing. Some had never seen it. Others vaguely remembered an older gold pendant. None could identify it. After 2 weeks. I started doubting Grandma's letter. Maybe the fortune never existed. Maybe dementia had confused memories. Maybe. No, that wasn't Grandma. She had forgotten names near the end. Never details, never facts, never promises. So I kept searching. Week 3 became week 4. Work suffered. Sleep disappeared. Coffee replaced meals. Every evening I spread maps, receipts, and business cards across my dining table. One thread. Just give me one thread. Then, I got one. An elderly jeweler named Mr. Patel looked at the sketch I'd drawn. His eyebrows lifted. I've seen something similar. My heart leaped. When? Perhaps 5 weeks ago. Who bought it? I didn't sell it. Someone came asking whether the clasp had been repaired before. What did you tell them? I remembered it. Why? He smiled softly. It was beautifully made. Who had it? I don't know. A woman. Older? No. Maybe 35. Dark hair. Very elegant. She'd said she bought it from an estate reseller. Estate reseller. Not antique dealer. The trail had already changed hands. Do you know the reseller? He handed me a business card. I believe this was them. Hope returned so suddenly it almost hurt. The estate reseller confirmed they had purchased it. Yes. From an antique shop. Yes. $650. Yes. They had resold it. To a private collector. No. They couldn't disclose his identity. Privacy policy. I offered money. Nothing. I pleaded. Nothing. The manager apologized sincerely. But policy was policy. I walked outside feeling defeated. Again. Then something strange happened. An employee hurried after me. Quietly. So, he whispered. I wasn't supposed to hear. I looked at him. The collector mentioned he was attending the Whitmore Heritage Auction next month. Whitmore. My great-grandfather's surname. That couldn't be coincidence. Where? He scribbled an address. I didn't tell you. No. You didn't. I folded the paper carefully. For the first time in weeks. I felt Grandma nudging me forward. The Whitmore Heritage Auction wasn't open to the public. Invitation only. Collectors, historians, private buyers. I had no invitation, no contacts, no way inside. For 2 days, I searched online. Nothing. Then my friend Emma called. Emma and I had been roommates in college. She worked as an event photographer. "I've got a weird question," I told her. She laughed. "When do you ever have normal questions? Can photographers bring assistants?" She paused. "Usually." "Why?" "I need to attend an auction." "Planning to steal artwork?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. "No. I'm trying to get back something that was stolen from me." Emma didn't ask unnecessary questions. She never had. "If I can get hired," she said slowly, "you'll carry camera equipment." "I'll carry a piano if necessary." She laughed. "I'll make some calls." 3 days later, my phone rang. "We're in." I nearly dropped the phone. "I owe you everything." "You owe me coffee." Done. "And Caroline?" "Yeah." "Wear comfortable shoes." "Why?" "Rich people take forever to make bad decisions." I smiled. She had no idea how accurate that sentence would become, because the auction wouldn't just lead me to the necklace, it would introduce me to a man who knew exactly what Grandma had been hiding, and who had been searching for my family for nearly 20 years. The morning of the Whitmore Heritage Auction felt strangely quiet. I woke up before my alarm. For a few seconds, lying there in bed, I forgot why my stomach was tied in knots. Then I saw Grandma's letter on my nightstand. The brass key resting on top of it caught the early sunlight. Everything came rushing back. The necklace, my parents, the fortune, the auction. I picked up the key and rolled it between my fingers. It was surprisingly heavy for its size. The ornate head was engraved with a tiny crest I'd never noticed before. A shield, 3 roses, a soaring hawk. The same hawk Grandma had carved into the wooden birdhouse outside her greenhouse years ago. At the time, I'd assumed she'd simply liked birds. Now I wondered if she'd been leaving clues my entire life. Emma met me outside the convention center just after 9. She handed me a black polo shirt with the event company's logo. "You officially carry lenses today." "I've never been so excited to carry camera equipment." She grinned. "You look terrified." "I am." "Good. Terrified people pay attention." Inside, the ballroom looked nothing like I expected. No flashy decorations, no television cameras, just polished hardwood floors, crystal chandeliers, and rows of wealthy collectors quietly studying display cases. The room smelled faintly of polished oak, old paper, and expensive perfume. People weren't chatting. They were observing, calculating, waiting. It reminded me less of an auction and more of a chess tournament. Everyone looked harmless. No one was. Emma disappeared toward the photography station while I wheeled 2 equipment cases across the ballroom. That gave me an excuse to move almost anywhere without attracting attention. I scanned every display: silverware, pocket watches, military medals, oil paintings, Victorian clocks. Nothing. No necklace. I reminded myself not to panic. Private collectors rarely displayed everything immediately. Patience. Grandma always said impatient people missed obvious things. Around noon, I heard 2 older men talking near one of the exhibits. Heard Richard finally found it. The pendant? Apparently. He paid far too little. I heard the seller had no idea. My pulse jumped. Pendant. I slowed my pace without making it obvious. The first man laughed quietly. "Lucky fool bought history for pocket change." The second shook his head. "If it's authentic." "It is." Then half the Whitmore mystery just walked into his collection. Whitmore. I nearly dropped the equipment case. Richard. I finally had a name. Finding Richard turned out to be easy. There was only one man in the room surrounded by people asking questions. Mid-60s, perfectly tailored navy suit, silver hair, calm posture. He didn't look arrogant. He looked curious. Collectors approached him with respect rather than fear. On the velvet-covered table beside him rested several antique pieces. None of them were the necklace, at least. Not yet. I spent almost an hour watching him. He never left the table unattended. Never. Whoever this man was, he knew the necklace mattered. At 2 o'clock, something unexpected happened. Richard glanced toward me, not casually, directly. His eyes narrowed. Then he excused himself from the conversation and walked straight toward me. Every instinct told me to leave. Instead, I stayed. "You've been watching my table for quite a while." His voice was polite, not accusing. "I'm working." He smiled slightly. "No. You're searching." I said nothing. "You don't know who I am." "I know enough." "Do you?" His eyes drifted toward the equipment case, then toward my pocket, toward the outline of the brass key. My heartbeat became painfully loud. He had noticed. "How?" "I believe," he said softly, "you have something that belongs with an object I own." Every muscle in my body tensed. "I'm sorry?" "The key." I froze. He knew. How could he possibly know? Before I answered, he reached into his jacket. Slowly, carefully. He removed a familiar blue velvet box, Grandma's box. I forgot where I was. Forgot the crowd. Forgot everything. My eyes locked onto it. "I bought this pendant 6 weeks ago." He spoke quietly enough that no one else could hear. "I've been hoping someone carrying the matching key would eventually find me." I couldn't breathe. He opened the box. There it was. Grandma's necklace. Exactly as I remembered. The tiny scratches near the clasp. The worn edges of the pendant. Even the faint lavender scent she'd somehow always left on her jewelry. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it until that moment. Without thinking, I reached toward it. Richard gently closed the lid. Not yet. He invited me into a private conference room. I hesitated. Emma noticed from across the ballroom. I gave her the smallest nod. She subtly picked up her phone. If I disappeared, someone would know. Inside the conference room sat only a wooden table and 4 leather chairs. Richard placed the velvet box in the center. Then he looked directly at me. "Your name." "Caroline Hughes." For the first time, genuine surprise crossed his face. "Hughes." He leaned back slowly. "So Eleanor chose correctly? You knew my grandmother?" "I've spent 19 years trying to find her." My mind struggled to keep up. "What?" "I was her attorney." That wasn't possible. Grandma had always used a local lawyer. Seeing my confusion, he nodded. "Officially?" "Yes." "Unofficially?" "I managed something else." "What?" "The Whitmore Trust." He opened a leather folder. Inside were faded documents. Maps, photographs, letters. Some dated back to the 1930s. "The Whitmore fortune is real." I swallowed hard. I knew it. "But it isn't cash sitting inside a vault." He slid one document toward me. It described hundreds of acres of mineral rights, historic investments, railroad shares, land leases, assets that had quietly appreciated for generations. "Current estimated value?" I whispered. He removed his glasses. "Just under $34 million. The number barely registered. 34 million. My parents had sold the necklace. For $650. Richard continued. "Your great-grandfather despised greed." "So I've gathered." He believed wealth should only pass to someone who valued family over money. I almost laughed. Then my parents never stood a chance. He gave a sad smile. "No. They didn't." He explained the strange inheritance system. The key confirmed identity. The pendant concealed the final instructions. The heir had to present both voluntarily. No court, no probate, no public filing. Everything depended on trust. Thomas Whitmore believed greedy people always exposed themselves before they could complete the process. For almost 90 years. He'd been right. Richard carefully turned the pendant over. Would you like to open it? I looked at the tiny key in my hand. For a second. I imagined Grandma smiling from her greenhouse. I inserted the key. Click. A sound so soft, yet somehow louder than anything I'd ever heard. The pendant opened. Inside wasn't a gemstone or money, just a tightly folded strip of paper. Richard unfolded it carefully. One sentence. The final ledger rests where roses bloom all winter. My eyes filled with tears immediately. The greenhouse. Richard smiled. So you know. Everything finally made sense. The roses, the greenhouse, the stories, the birdhouse, the crest. Grandma hadn't hidden clues randomly. She'd wrapped them inside memories. Only someone who genuinely spent time with her could ever solve them. Daniel couldn't. My parents couldn't. Because they had never been there. Not really. We should go today, Richard said. I nodded immediately. Then something stopped me. No. He looked surprised. What do you mean? I want my parents to know. They don't deserve warning. They deserve certainty. Richard remained silent. They think they won. They think they stole something meaningless. I looked down at the necklace. I want them to watch the truth unfold. For the first time since Grandma died, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. Carefully. Patiently. Exactly the way she always had. I didn't want revenge built on anger. I wanted consequences built on facts. If my parents were going to lose everything, they would do it with their own words echoing in their ears. It's just an old necklace. We made a family decision. Probably worth a few $100s. Every sentence they'd thrown at me would become evidence. Not in court. In life. Richard looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. You really are Eleanor's granddaughter. I smiled back. For the first time, I said quietly, I'm beginning to believe that. We closed the pendant, locked it again, and drove toward the one place my parents believed held nothing of value anymore. Grandma's abandoned greenhouse. Neither of us realized. We weren't the only ones heading there. Because someone else had been watching Richard at the auction. Someone who had overheard just enough to understand that the necklace was worth far more than $650. And by the time we reached the property, they would already be waiting. By the time Richard and I turned onto the narrow country road leading to my grandmother's cottage, the afternoon sky had darkened into a heavy blanket of gray. The property looked almost exactly as I remembered. The white paint had begun to peel. The porch swing still hung slightly crooked. Wildflowers had reclaimed most of the front garden. But the greenhouse still stood behind the house, its old glass panels catching what little light filtered through the clouds. For a moment, I couldn't move. So much of my childhood happened here. I whispered. Richard nodded. Eleanor never wanted this place sold. I laughed bitterly. My parents wanted to list it before the funeral flowers had even wilted. He didn't look surprised. I know. You know, I was there when they asked if the greenhouse could be demolished. My stomach tightened. They what? They thought it was wasting valuable land. I closed my eyes. Of course they did. To them, memories had always been obstacles. Everything had a price. Nothing had meaning. As we walked toward the greenhouse, something felt wrong. The front door was slightly open. I knew I'd locked it after Grandma's funeral. Richard noticed it too. You weren't expecting anyone? I slowly shook my head. No. The wind pushed the old door back and forth with a soft creak. Creak. Pause. Creak. Every instinct told me someone was inside. Richard quietly stepped in front of me. Stay behind me. I can call the sheriff. Not yet. He carefully pushed the door open. The familiar scent of damp earth, roses, and cedar flooded over me. It hit me so suddenly that tears filled my eyes. For one brief moment, I could almost hear Grandma humming while watering her flowers. Then another sound broke the silence. A boot scraping against concrete. Someone else was inside. Well, a voice echoed from the far end of the greenhouse. I was wondering when you'd arrive. A man stepped out from behind the rose beds. Mid-40s, expensive jacket, leather gloves, dark hair beginning to gray. He wasn't nervous. He looked amused. Richard sighed. I was afraid it'd be you. You know him? Richard didn't take his eyes off the man. Victor Lang. The man smiled. Collector. Richard corrected him. Treasure hunter. Victor gave a theatrical little bow. I prefer opportunity specialist. Even before he spoke again, I disliked him. There was something cold about him. The kind of smile that never reached the eyes. I overheard enough at the auction, Victor admitted. Not everything. But enough. He looked directly at me. So, you're Eleanor's granddaughter. I didn't answer. He shrugged. I'll save us time. I'll take the necklace. No. The key. No. And whatever's hidden here. No. He laughed. I wasn't asking. For the first time all day, I saw Richard smile, not because he found the situation funny, because Victor had already made a mistake. The inheritance doesn't work that way. Victor frowned. I've read enough. No. Richard replied calmly. You've guessed enough. The documents require the rightful heir. Victor looked at me. So I'll simply have her cooperate. His confidence lasted about 3 seconds. Then he heard another sound. Car doors. Multiple. Gravel crunching beneath tires. Victor turned toward the windows. 3 sheriff's vehicles pulled into the driveway. His smile disappeared. Emma stepped out of the first car. She gave me a tiny wave. Behind her came Sheriff Collins, an older man I vaguely remembered from childhood. He looked directly at Victor. Afternoon. Victor slowly lowered his hands. You planned this. I looked at him. No. You planned it yourself. His expression shifted. Confusion, then realization. Emma smiled. When Richard walked off with a stranger at the auction, she said, I started wondering who else might follow. She'd noticed Victor hours earlier. She'd quietly called the sheriff before we ever left the city, just in case. Grandma always said to expect greed. Emma expected it too. Victor was arrested for attempted extortion and trespassing before he ever touched the necklace. As deputies led him away, he looked back at me. This isn't over. I simply smiled. It is for you. Once the property was secure, Richard unfolded the tiny note again. The final ledger rests where roses bloom all winter. I walked slowly toward Grandma's favorite rosebed. Unlike the others, these roses had always bloomed long after the first frost. As a child, I'd asked how. Grandma had winked. Some roots run deeper than people think. I knelt beside the stone border. There, half hidden beneath decades of ivy, a small iron hatch. My breath caught. I've never noticed this. You weren't supposed to. Richard handed me a small gardening trowel. Together we cleared away the soil. The hatch opened with surprising ease. Inside rested a narrow steel box, untouched, dry, waiting. Grandma had protected it all these years. She knew exactly who would eventually come looking. Me. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of neatly sealed envelopes, leather-bound ledgers, original deeds, stock certificates, maps, letters, and one final envelope. Across the front, in Grandma's unmistakable handwriting, were just 5 words. For Caroline. Only Caroline. I opened it. My sweet girl, if you've reached this point, then you succeeded where others failed. Not because you were cleverer, because you loved without calculating what you might receive in return. That is why this belongs to you. Never let wealth become your identity. Let it become your opportunity to protect others from becoming what destroyed our family. Love always. Grandma. I cried. Not politely, not quietly. The kind of crying that comes after months of carrying something too heavy alone. Richard rested a hand gently on my shoulder. She was very proud of you. I wish she'd told me. She did. I looked at him. Every time she chose you. The legal process took nearly 6 months. Unlike movies, nothing happened overnight. There were accountants, trust officers, property records dating back generations, audits, court confirmations. Everything had to be verified. Fortunately, Grandma had organized every document with astonishing precision. Richard often joked she trusted paperwork more than people. He wasn't wrong. The Whitmore Trust recognized me as its sole beneficiary. Every legal requirement had been satisfied. The key, the pendant, the ledger, the named heir. There was nothing for anyone to challenge. Then my parents found out. Not from me, from Richard's legal notice. I still remember Dad's phone call. He didn't even say hello. 34 million? His voice shook. Approximately. You knew? I found out after you sold the necklace. Silence. Then, we're family. There it was. The sentence I'd been expecting my entire life. Not, I'm sorry. Not, we made a mistake. Just, we're family. I answered quietly. You stopped acting like family a long time ago. Mom called the next day. She cried, real tears, or convincing ones. I didn't know. I believe you. If we'd known. I know. She stopped talking, because she realized exactly what she'd admitted. If they'd known, they never would have stolen the necklace. Not because it was wrong, because it was valuable. That single sentence exposed everything. Daniel tried a different strategy. He invited me to lunch. The first time he'd voluntarily wanted to see me in almost a year. He smiled too much, asked too many questions. Finally, he leaned forward. So, what now? I don't understand. You're rich, I suppose. You could help the family. I looked at him. What family? His smile faded. The one that sold my grandmother's gift? The one that broke into my apartment? The one that told me I was being dramatic? He had no answer. Over the next several months, lawsuits arrived. My parents challenged the trust. Lost. They challenged Grandma's competency. Lost. They claimed the necklace belonged to the estate. Lost. Every argument collapsed beneath decades of carefully prepared documentation. Richard had anticipated every possible attack long before any of us were born. Grandma had trusted exactly the right person. Eventually, the legal bills became too much. My parents sold their vacation cabin, then Dad's boat, then refinanced the house. Ironically, their obsession with money cost them far more than the inheritance ever could have given them. People in town talked. Small towns always do. At first, the story spread as gossip. Then it became something else. A warning. People stopped saying, "Poor Caroline." They started saying, "Can you believe what her parents did?" For the first time in my life, I wasn't the embarrassing daughter. They were the embarrassing parents. And strangely, that mattered less than I thought it would. Because revenge wasn't watching them lose. It was realizing I no longer needed them to finally see my worth. A year later, I reopened Grandma's greenhouse, not as a private garden, as a nonprofit horticultural education center. Children came every Saturday to learn how to grow flowers, vegetables, and herbs. Retirees volunteered. Schools visited. The place that greed had almost destroyed became a place where people shared freely. Above the entrance, I hung a small wooden plaque, Grandma's favorite sentence. People reveal who they truly are when nobody important is watching. Every time I unlocked the greenhouse in the morning, I smiled, because now I understood what she meant. I still wear the necklace, not because of what's hidden inside. The fortune has already been claimed. The pendant is empty now. I wear it because it reminds me of something far more valuable. My grandmother didn't leave me wealth. She left me proof. Proof that character outlives money. Proof that patience defeats greed. Proof that the people who underestimate you are often building the very path you'll use to walk past them. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't becoming richer than the people who hurt you. It's becoming someone they can never manipulate again. When people hear my story, they usually ask the same question. Did you ever forgive your parents? The truth is, forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing. I let go of the anger because carrying it was exhausting, but I never gave them another opportunity to betray me. Some doors don't have to be slammed. They simply stay closed. Grandma used to say that the rarest inheritance isn't money, it's wisdom earned through someone else's mistakes. Looking back, I think she was right. The necklace unlocked a fortune, but the greatest treasure it ever carried was the lesson hidden inside it. Greed always reaches for what's valuable. Love recognizes what's priceless. If this story kept you hooked until the very end, let me know in the comments. What would you have done if your own family had stolen something priceless from you without knowing its true value? If you enjoy stories of betrayal, justice, family drama, and satisfying revenge, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more true-style Reddit revenge narrations. And remember, the people who think they've taken everything from you sometimes have no idea they're handing you the chance to change your life forever.